أشراف مطلوب وطالبه لله أكرام من يمشي على قدم. العلم نور مبين يستضيء به أهل السعادات والجهال في الظلم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، أما بعد. طيب، الشيخ says رحمه الله: ثانيا النذور vows، وعقد النذر مكروه، وقد نهى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن النذر وقال إنه لا يأتي بخير إنما يستخرج به من البخيل. طيب, now the Sheikh is going on to vows. The previous one was on oaths, yameen, saying Wallahi I am going to do this, Wallahi I am not going to do this, or Wallahi I did not do this, XYZ. Right. Now it's on a nudhur. It is on a nudhur. And another is to make something wajib upon you that Allah did not make wajib upon you. Another is to make something wajib upon you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make wajib upon you. Right? So that is the meaning of vow. إلزام المكلف نفسه لله شيئا. To make something wajib upon yourself that Allah did not make wajib upon you. For example, saying, I am going to perform i'tikaf in the Prophet's Masjid sallallahu alaihi wasallam next year. That is another vow that you have taken, and it is wajib for you to fulfill that. Like normally, is it wajib for you to perform i'tikaf in the Masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? No, it is not. Like by you saying that, it becomes what? Wajib upon you. That's why the scholars say, al-wajibu bin-nadri kal-wajibi bi-shara'. Al-wajibu bin-nadri kal-wajibi bi-shara'. That which is wajib by way of a vow, it becomes wajib like the Sharia, like any other obligation of the Sharia, like the Salah, Hajj, fasting, and so on. In Arabic, al-wajibu bin-nadri kal-wajibi bi-shar'i. That which is wajib upon you, that you've made wajib upon you or binding upon you by way of a vow, it is binding upon you as if the Sharia has commanded you to do it. So that is the meaning of vow. The hukum or the ruling of it is that it is disliked. The hukum of making a vow is that it is disliked. And we can see that in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said, إِنَّهُ لَا يَأْتِ بِخَيْرٍ. It doesn't come with goodness. إِنَّمَا يُسْتَخْرَجُ بِهِ مِنَ الْبَخِيلِ. It only causes the greedy person or the stingy person to pay something, to give something. So it is a mas'ala, or it is something that is disliked. However, Allah says, يُوفُونَ بِالنَّذْرِ وَيَخَافُونَ يَوْمًا كَانَ شَرُّهُ مُسْتَطِيرًا. Allah Jalla wa Ala praises in Surah Al-Insan, praises those that stick to their vows. So we said it is what? Disliked to do it in the first place, to make it in the first place, but it is praiseworthy and wajib to fulfill it after making that vow. That's why Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, Shaykh Sa'di, he says it's from the qara'ib al-ilm. It's from the strange things when it comes to knowledge. Because normally when something is disliked, then everything else that leads to it is disliked. And if something is mustahab or if something is wajib, then everything that leads to it is wajib. For example, salah is what? 5 daily prayers are wajib. To make wudu becomes what? Wajib. Attending a class is what? Sunnah. Going to the masjid also becomes a what? for that class or going to that class becomes a sunnah. Lakin that is not the case with vows. Initially taking it is disliked. Initially making that vow is disliked, and lakin sticking to it is praiseworthy. Is that understood? طيب. Then the Shaykh says رحمه الله فإذا عقده على بر وجب عليه الوفاء. فإن عقد, if he makes it binding upon himself to stick to something which is a sunnah, which is legislated, or if he does it, a vow, then it is وجب عليه الوفاء. It is wajib for him to stick to it. If he makes a vow, it is wajib for him to stick to it. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man nadara an yuti'a Allah," whoever makes a vow to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَلْيُطِعْهُ, let him obey him. And whomsoever makes a vow to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let him not disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first mas'ala is that if a person says, I am going to do an act of goodness, for example, wallahi, I am going to pray in this masjid, or I'm going to pray the whole of Taraweeh in that masjid, in a certain masjid, then that person has to stick to it. That person has to stick to it. Is that understood? So he has made a vow on something which is a ta'ah, which is obedience, then it is wajib for him or for that person to stick to it. Like, whether it's because of a blessing that Allah has given him, or whether it's just that person saying it out of the blue, saying, Wallahi, for this Ramadan, I'm going to pray 15 days in Masjid Matalan XYZ, in a certain masjid. That becomes wajib upon him. Because we said the qa'idah a few minutes ago, al-wajibu bin-nadri kal-wajibi bi-shari. You didn't write that down, because he wasn't here. Nah, write that down. Al-wajibu bin-nadri kal-wajibi bi-shari. So the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, for that type, wajaba alayhi al-wafa, it is wajib for the person to stick to it. And then the Shaykh, the evidence is, ثم ليقضوا تفثهم وليوفوا نذورهم وليطوفوا بالبيت العتيق وليطوفوا بالبيت العتيق. Allah Jalla wa Ala commanded the believers to keep their oaths. Right. If a person is not able to keep that, it is haram for them to break the oath unless they're totally unable to fulfill that vow. So if it happens that they are ajiz, they are not able to do it, then they expiate like the kafara of the yameen, that we just passed. The Prophet ﷺ said, kafaratu nadri, kafaratu yameen. So they free a slave, or feed 10 people, or clothe 10 people. And if they're not able to do that, then they what? Fast 3 days. Then they fast 3 days if they're not able to do that. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, وَإِنْ كَانَ النَّذْرُ مُبَاحًا, lakin if it is something which is permissible, if a person makes a nadr on something which is permissible, أو جاريا مجرى اليمين, or it is like مجرى اليمين كالنذر اللجاج والغضب, أو كان النذر معصية لم يجب الوفاء به وفيه كفارة يمين إذا لم يوفي به. طيب. The next type he's talking about, the second kind, is something that is mubah. Something that is mubah. So he says, Wallahi, I intend to do anything that is mubah, or I am going to make sure that I live in a certain place, in a certain city, or that I move to a certain city. That is a vow that he has taken. Like, and that is something that is permissible. That is something which is mubah. It is not an ibadah that they have to stick to. In that case, they're allowed to not fulfill it. Like, if they don't fulfill it, then they still have to expiate. They still have to expiate for it. They make a vow on something that is permissible to do so, permissible to do, and permissible to leave. It is permissible for them to keep that vow, and it is okay for them to break that vow. Like, if they break that vow, they need to what? They need to expiate for breaking that vow. Why? Because it is not a da'ah, it is not an ibadah on its own. طيب. طيب. The next type is أو جاريا مجرى اليمين. أو جاريا مجرى اليمين. And this is what is referred to as النذر اللجاج أو الغضب, where a person makes a vow that he's going to do something, لكن he's making something wajib upon himself, لكن it's in order for him to stop himself from doing something. So for example, let's say he's got a bad habit. The person has a bad habit and he says, Wallah, every time I do this thing, I am going to مثلا fast 10 days. Every time I do this act, this something which is مثلا haram, every time I do this, I'm gonna fast 10 days. Every time I get angry in this way, I'm going to fast 10 days. So that is called a lijaj. He's preventing himself, or he's encouraging himself to not do that act. He's encouraging himself to not do that act. And that ruling is that, or the ruling on that is not, it is not wajib for him to keep that vow. It is not wajib for him to keep that vow, because obviously he did not intend by way of this to do a da'ah. He was only intending to prevent himself, to encourage himself from doing something. Lakin obviously he has to still, when he breaks that vow, he has to expiate for that. And the expiation is the kafara of the yameen that we just passed by. Right. Then the Shaykh says, وَإِنْ كَانَ أَوْ كَانَ نَذْرَ مَعْصِيَةٍ. And the fourth type is that if it is another of a ma'siyah. So he makes a vow. He makes a vow that he's not going to do something which is wajib. For example, Wallahi, I'm not going to pray. If I go and pray in this masjid, then I'm going to, every time I pray in this masjid, then I'm going to free a slave. Every time I go to this, every time I speak to a family member of mine and I keep ties with them, I'm going to do this thing to expiate for that, as a vow that they make. Or I am not going to keep ties with my family, the family that is wajib for him to keep ties with. That is a ma'siyah. What comes under that is also the vows that these mushrikun do, or people do at graves. I am going to slaughter next to the grave of this individual. So that is obviously, it's a ma'siyah. It is haram to do, lakin they have to fulfill or make up for that the oath that they've done, because it is haram. Because it is haram to keep. طيب. وفيه كفارة اليمين إذا لم يوفي به, and وفيه, and in it there's the kafara of the yameen, the same kafara for breaking the oath is now the same as breaking the vow that a person normally makes. Like with this one, it is haram to keep because it is another ma'siyah. طيب. Is that understood? You have to do it, you have to do the expiation. You have to break it because it is a ma'siyah, it is a sin, and you have to expiate for it because it is another at the end of the day. It is a vow that you have broken at the end of the day. Yeah. No, not the one that is imposed upon himself. What the kafara that he has to do is kafara to yameen. Kafara to nadr, kafara to yameen. For example, feeding feeding a person, 10 people, clothing them, or freeing a slave. If they can't find any of these, then they move over to the fourth one, which is now. And the reason for that is because it is not an ibadah that they're doing. It is not them saying, I'm going to do an ibadah. Lakin it is them trying to encourage themselves in order to do something or in order to stay away from something. صح. Lakin it's not ibadah from the get-go, from the asl, it is not ibadah. They're trying to avoid that. For even the person staying away from a certain habit that is haram, is from the sharia to stay away from it. Lakin in that sort of wording, in that form, is called lijaj. And there's a difference between that and saying, I'm going to مثلا spend i'tikaf, the last 10 days of i'tikaf in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Mecca. So now he's not with this saying, I'm going to do i'tikaf in the masjid of the Prophet, in the masjid of the Prophet. He's not encouraging himself to do anything. There's no man'a in there or no encouragement in there. He's just saying, I'm going to do it. Like with this other vow, he's doing it in order to encourage himself to stay away from this thing, to abstain from it. لا, it is kafara. He has to do the normal kafara. He has to do the normal kafara. طيب. طيب. So that is the kafarat al-ma'siyah, that is not permissible. وَيَحْرُمُ الْوَفَاءُ فِي الْمَعْسِيَةِ, and it is impermissible for him to keep that. So that is the end of the vows.
وقل رب زدني